the same one, Michelle Palin. He lives here. Now, the trouble is we haven't been able to get any pictures out. These natives say they're still there. There's still dinosaurs there. His bones are as strong as pieces of brass, says the Bible. His bones are like bars of iron.
There's a thing coming up on
they are
carbon dating that I think you might find interesting.
They are huge, and there's nothing like that today. Why don't we have those things today? I think it's because we're in a different kind of a heaven and earth system.
By the way,
how did the universe
an evolutionist?
Well, many evolutionists believe that matter and energy of the universe originated from an explosion, the Big Bang.
Job
an infinitely
Martin,
dense speck of something exploded. And some people say it was an invisible speck. That's how it all got started. That's how
the
it got
evolution
dinosaurs.
of
Nothing
Creationist.
exploded. And ultimately, over millions of years, you have dinosaurs.
Check this out.
Well, does that make any sense? The first law of thermodynamics says matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. So then evolution actually goes against, the Big Bang idea goes against the first law of thermodynamics. How did order and regularity and predictability, where did they come from? Well, evolutionists insist the universe began with the chaos and disorderliness of an explosion. A disorderly explosion. Have you ever seen an explosion that created more order? There is no such thing. Well, then how can the evolutionists claim it was an explosion that got us all this order and predictability and regularity that you see in outer space, as well as here? I mean, they can send a probe clear out to the farthest end of our solar system. They know exactly when it's going to get there. They know exactly what it's going to do. How does an explosion produce that kind of thing? And by the way, some of our planets are swirling in the wrong direction. If an explosion created everything out there, they ought to all be kind of swirling in the same direction. They're not doing that. There's all kinds of reasons why that doesn't make sense. How did life originate? Evolutionists believe living organisms first arose from non-living, dead, lifeless matter of some sort. The law of biogenesis says, and cell theory says, life only comes from life. Nothing that's alive has ever come from just lifeless chemicals. Evolution violates the law of biogenesis. And yet so many people believe in it by faith. Furthermore, before the Big Bang, if all the matter in the universe was condensed down into this infinitely dense speck of matter, now we have a problem. Infinitely dense matter. That means it's just as dense as it can be. Well, it has to be. If all the planets and stars and asteroids and everything else is all squeezed down into this little speck, and some say it was invisible speck, that would be infinitely dense matter, and it would have infinitely powerful gravity. Which way would the gravity be pulling? Infinitely powerful gravity. Is it pulling in, or is it pulling out? Well, infinitely powerful gravity would be pulling in. All right, if that's true, then what made the Big Bang go kaboom and shoot everything out if you have infinitely powerful gravity pulling everything in? All right, so I asked that question at a major northeastern university, and there's all these students and professors, and I said, okay, you just tell me, what made the Big Bang go kaboom? They already agreed. Infinitely powerful gravity would be pulling everything in. I said, what would make it go kaboom and shoot it all out? You're not allowed to ask that question. This is this physics professor. You're not allowed to ask that question. I said, is that your answer? He says, yes, we don't ask questions like that. All right, now what did he just tell me? We don't have a clue. That's what he just told me. We just take it by faith because we don't want to believe God did it. And that's what they have to do. Human population. Now, a lot of this is estimates. How do we know for sure? How do we know how many people were there 4,500 years ago? Well, we know that because the Bible says 8 people survived the flood. All right, let's start with 8 people 4,500 years ago. Have they been measuring population? We've been measuring population for a long time. How long did it take to get the first 1 billion people on planet Earth? Well, that was about 1800. In about the year 1800, we had about 1 billion people on planet Earth. Well, if there were 8 people 4,500 years ago, and there's 1 billion people in 1800, how long did it take to go from 8 to 1 billion? Well, that's about 4,300 years, isn't it? 2,500 plus 1,800. That's about 4,300, somewhere around it there. That's about how long it took to get the first billion that's recorded in history, 1 billion people. Well, then how long did it take to get the second billion? Well, from 1800 to 1930. So that's 130 years. So it took 4,300 years to go from 8 to 1 billion, and then it only took another 130 years to go from 1 billion to 2 billion. And then it only took another 32 years to go from 2 billion to 3 billion. And then it only took 15 years to go from 3 to 4 billion. Do you see a problem here if you say that the universe is billions of years old? A huge problem with population. Where are all the people? Since 1800, we have 5 billion people, just since 1800. And it took up to 1800 to get the first billion. And population has gone just like that. I think it's an evidence that this planet Earth has not had people on it for very long. Matter of fact, we could say, since about 2,500 years ago, about 4,500 years ago, we started with 8 people, and that pretty reasonably gives us what we have today, starting right after the flood of the days of Noah. Well, written history is too short. Russell Humphreys tells us this in a little booklet that Answers in Genesis puts out. According to Evolutionists, Stone Age man existed for 100,000 years before beginning to make written records about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. That's the first written records. What does that mean? Well, prehistoric man had built megalithic monuments, made beautiful cave paintings, kept records of lunar phases. Why would he wait 1,000 centuries before using the same skills to record history? The biblical time scale is much more likely. That makes sense to me. And so, if man was around that long, surely he would have written some history. We don't have any. Why don't we have any? Because man hasn't been around that long. That's why we don't have any. Speak to the earth, says God in the book of Job, chapter 12, 8 and 9. Speak to the earth. It'll teach thee. And the fishes of the sea shall declare unto thee. By the way, you know, in our lifetime, they have found these pathways in the sea that fish follow. It's like superhighways in the oceans. And you have salmon that can find their way back to the Columbia River and back up to some little brook somewhere after being gone for a couple of years. And then they swim back and they find the very spot where they were spawned. How do they do that? God says, you know, you can learn some things. Study my oceans. Study my earth. Well, when we study the earth, one thing we learn is that Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker.